Who knows what this thing is? Anybody? Raise of hands. I'm going to assume that some of you raised your hands, but a lot of you didn't. This is the TurboGrafx-16. It's a console from the early 90s, and it was a competitor to the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis. Or at least that's what it was meant to be, but from what I can tell, it didn't pose much of a threat to either company. You can mention the names Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, and most people will generally know what you're talking about. Even some people who don't know anything about video games might recognize the names. But this? Yeah, not so much. And that's not to say it was bad or anything. There were a lot of really good games for this, but it just never really reached the popularity and success of its competition. Why? I don't know. I'm certainly no video game historian. Might have been a lack of third-party support, might have been bad advertising. I really don't know. And that's not really what this video is about. I've never gotten a chance to talk about this thing before, so today I decided to. I have a handful of games here, some pretty notable, some that I personally have never heard of before, but I figured that because this is my first video talking about the TurboGrafx-16, I should probably talk about the game that came bundled with every purchase of the console. Keith Courage in Alpha Zones. Well, with a name like that, actually I really don't know what to expect. Sounds kinda lame, actually. I mean, his name is Keith Courage. That is, it's not cool, so to speak. But let's just dive right in. Don't really have anything else to say to preface this, so yeah, let's get to it. So it's a side-scroller, and you can't run. Just want that to be the first thing I say. This is your speed. Better get used to it. You can crouch, you can jump, you can swing your sword. No running, though. Slow and steady wins the race. Gameplay looks real exciting, doesn't it? It's even more exhilarating when you're playing it. Well, it's still better than the demo they show at the start. It's just awful. He just gets hit a ton and then dies. What an awful way to show off your game up top. So it's clearly a side-scroller, and it's functional. The buttons work. But like I mentioned offhandedly before, it is pretty slow. Seriously, none of the platforming in this game feels good or rewarding. It's just kind of tedious and boring because of how slow you're moving. It just doesn't feel good. Now, it's not all this slow. Every time you reach the end of a level, a rainbow engulfs you and transforms you into a giant robot. Well, I won't say that I don't have any questions, but I won't bother asking them. I'll save them for later. These levels move a lot faster, and in turn, they feel much better. I actually had some fun playing through these robot stages, but they're not perfect. The level design is not always your friend. While the regular levels are pretty basic in terms of design, simply reach the end of a level by walking to the right, hitting enemies as they appear, and occasionally jumping to and from moving platforms, these robot levels are a bit less linear. Having you drop down to lower levels or climb up to higher ones, sometimes switching from walking to the right to walking to the left. The levels are still linear, but they're a lot less straightforward. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it doesn't exactly do much to enhance the simple and sometimes relatively boring gameplay. You can move, crouch, jump, swing a sword, very simple. No power-ups, no major gameplay changes, it's pretty basic. And that alone isn't necessarily a bad thing. Look at Super Mario Bros. It's a pretty simple game, especially when compared to the later entries in the franchise, which would go on to do a lot more to spicing up the gameplay. But it definitely proves one thing. If you're going to make a simple platformer, then you need to make sure that the controls and the overall feel is good. It needs to feel good to do these simple tasks that the game asks of you. And this game, well, I've definitely played worse. It doesn't control terribly. In fact, when I think about it, it's definitely passable. But that also definitely doesn't mean it's amazing. The controls are responsive, and they definitely work, but they don't feel amazing. There's no real sense of momentum, and well, it's pretty much impossible to explain exactly how the controls feel, but let's just say that jumping is weird, most notably when in the mech. It just feels bad when jumping and moving at the same time. Mid-air control just doesn't feel like you think it should. You just kinda have to feel it to understand. It's really hard to explain. But yeah, it's far from perfected here. Even when walking on ice, they try to make it feel slippery, but it just feels a little off. Once again though, it's not awful, and I don't think that I ever died because of the controls or the physics or anything like that. No, I have the level design to blame for most of my deaths. I almost never died in these levels, but in the robot stages, I would die often. Now, it was partially because these levels have way more enemies in them, and generally harder enemies, but it was mostly because I would often just be forced to drop down to lower levels in order to progress. And I would often fall onto spikes that would instantly kill me. And this happens a lot. So much. No real way to avoid it either. No way of knowing what's below you before you drop down. Did I mention this happens a fair bit? Because it did. And you know what? Let's take this time to ask ourselves a very important question. One that I've been sitting on for a few minutes. What the heck even is this game? You play as a guy named Keith Courage who fights with a sword through a clearly Japanese-style world, buying power-ups for a giant robot, which you get beamed into via a magical rainbow. And the robot also fights with a sword, by the way. Also, the enemies in this game consist of little red guys, lucky cat statues, little mole men with blue hats, nightmare skulls, decapitated alien heads, robots with giant faces on them, and giant guns sticking out of their giant faces. Whatever this thing is. And of course, the all-time classic, how could we forget? Different colored versions of pretty much all those previously mentioned enemies. So yeah, game's pretty weird. I shall consult the instruction guide. I'm sure this will make sense of everything, as it always does. You are Keith Courage. Struck by a giant meteor, the world has been invaded by creatures from another planet. Burrowing deep within the Earth's surface, the planet of bad, beastly alien dudes, seeks to take over the world. As a member of NICE, the Nations of International Citizens for Earth, your mission is to defeat bad and bring peace back to the world. It also mentions that the mech is called the Nova suit, and it was created by my father who died and left it to me. You know, something's telling me that they changed a fair bit during localization. I'm pretty sure that the word dude was not included in the original Japanese manual. I mean, that's just my opinion. And yep, it's actually a game based on an old anime named Spirit Hero Wataru, a story about a boy who makes a toy robot and then gets sucked into a fantasy world by a dragon and then has to save this new world from an evil demon named Dokudar. Excuse my probably very incorrect pronunciations. Oh, and also a magical rainbow transforms him into a larger version of his toy robot, which has the spirit of a dragon in it. Or something. So yeah, this all suddenly makes a lot more sense. Wait, there's still a Nations of International Citizens for Earth, right? No, that was just for the English version. I think they thought it sounded cool or something. Anime is dumb! What? That was so clever! How could they get rid of that? BAD and NICE are acronyms, so it's literally bad versus nice. That is... I almost can't comprehend it. It's so genius! Yeah, that doesn't surprise me that you would say that, but it's not clever. It's not clever or genius or anything like that. It's just... I guess it's cute, but it's not genius. I don't think. Something's gotta be done about this. It's up to me to rectify this mistake. That anime did it all wrong. They ruined Keith Courage. I mean, it's nothing sacred. You know that the anime came out first, right? Anyway, I'm just gonna move past that. Nothing he says is ever important. So yeah, looks like we've got another totally rad situation on our hands. Nah, I'm not gonna bother. So one thing I did find odd about this game is the mere fact that it's a side-scroller. I watched a couple episodes of this anime, and it borrows from RPGs and has a real adventurous feel to it. So why didn't they make this an RPG? Something like a turn-based RPG, or maybe something resembling Zelda. Apparently they did eventually make one for the Famicom, and I think a few other games that I can't find much info on, but still. It does seem like they tried to implement some RPG-ish elements into this game, but they don't really work. Actually, they really don't work. They kinda just make the game worse. For the sake of future discussion, I will be referring to these levels as overworld levels, and these are the underworld levels, since that's what they call them in this comedy sketch of an instruction manual. You can stop in at a variety of shops. These shops are in every overworld level, and they consist of Nurse Nancy, who heals you, the Weapons Master, who sells you better swords for your robot, the Wise Wizard, who sells you bombs, which you can use with your robot, and the Prophet, who provides information and hints, which are sometimes useful, I guess, not really. Yeah. And no, I'm not going to try to pronounce any of those names. That's what the power of text is for. These interactions all feel a bit out of place in such a linear-style side-scroller game. You can even go back to previous levels to revisit them. But why would you ever do that? Also, you get coins by killing enemies. Every time you kill an enemy, there's a small chance that they'll drop anywhere between 50 to 100 gold's worth of coins. And in order to beat this game, you just gotta grind. Find a spot where the enemies continue to spawn off screen, stand there while swinging your sword, and get ready to wait many, many minutes until you finally have enough to buy whatever you want. And this really isn't me cheesing the game. You need to do this. The sword upgrades are essential for beating the game. So every overworld stage consists of at least 10 minutes of me standing and grinding coins to buy that level's upgrade. And when you die, you respawn at the start of your current level with half of your current gold. So you can't even just get all the grinding out of the way in one spot. You really just have to do it before every purchase. And even if I went through the entire game without dying, I would probably still need to grind a fair bit. Enemies don't drop nearly enough coins for you not to have to farm them. The only way to regain health in the overworld levels is to pay Nurse Nancy, but it's a pretty big waste of money. Not only can you grab hearts in the underworld stages by killing enemies, but whenever you die, you come back with 3 hearts. And 3 hearts is always more than enough to get through these levels. The overworld levels are not hard. It would be very difficult to die here due to taking damage, so it really is just a waste of money. And I never really used bombs much either, at all. Because of the amount of grinding necessary to afford the swords, which are much more important and useful, I never really wanted to waste my money, and by extension my time, buying bombs. Especially since you lose half of your bombs every time you die. They're really not gonna last that long, so they just don't really feel worth it. Your sword is the only thing that isn't affected by death at all, thank God. So yeah, the vaguely RPG-esque elements, not great. They kinda just complicate things. But I guess I wouldn't have as much to say about the game if it weren't for them, so there's that. The graphics in this game aren't bad. I mean, it's not the most beautiful game ever, especially for a 16-bit console, but it's not ugly. It looks decent for the year it came out, originally coming out in Japan in 1988. The music, on the other hand, is quite awful. Not much more to add to that, just kinda bad music. I mean, unlike bad controls, I don't really need to go to lengths to explain it. You can just hear how bad it is. But you don't have to listen to it for long. The game is only a couple hours long, very short, and it's actually not that hard. The overworld levels are just a breeze, and the underworld levels are a bit harder, but in no way impossible, since you have unlimited lives and continues. Even if one of these levels is giving you trouble, you can just keep trying over and over again until you get it, and it probably won't take you very long. The only part in this game that really requires much skill are the boss fights, and even then, they're not that hard for the most part. Not that I'm complaining, I am not. I actually enjoyed playing through a game that wasn't too challenging. A game can be easy and still be fun. Sometimes. Where it isn't fun is how grindy it is. My God, I really gotta reiterate, so much grinding. I have so much video footage of me just standing in one spot killing enemies for God knows how long. And it's not even just in the overworld levels for money. I had to grind occasionally in the underworld levels as well, when I needed health. Not for nearly as long, mind you, but those enemies were also harder to kill, so yeah, grinding sucks. And that last sword upgrade costs so much money. It took forever. And apparently you need this one to beat the game. You can't beat the game without purchasing it. So, yay. I grinded and I got it. I really earned this sword through my hours and hours of intense training. Intense training. Intense training. In all honesty, throughout this entire game, I'm pretty sure I spent a full hour doing nothing but standing in place in a level and grinding for one reason or another. And I beat this game in 3 hours. So that's really saying something. And I beat the game. Hip hip hooray for me. The victory is complete. Keith Courage has battled and defeated the beastly alien dudes bad. Fighting through the 7 deadly zones, Keith has restored the planet Earth to its former peace. A peace his father knew well and died for. Using the Nova suit his father created, Keith persevered in the face of all obstacles. Keith has dedicated his victory to his father's memory. Keith Courage and his friends are committed to restoring the Earth to its previous splendor. For now, the world is safe. However, Keith is prepared to use the power of the Nova suit to defend the Earth from future dangers. Look for the next Keith Courage adventure! You know, even with all my complaints, the game's not awful, and I'm sure a lot of people really enjoyed playing through this game back when it first came out. It just doesn't really hold up today. Though, even for back then, it was not perfect. There were probably better games to include as the pack-in game for the console. In fact, I played various other games that I had for this console to get video footage to use. And literally all of the other games I happened to play were more fun than this one. So if that says anything, then yeah, there it is. So in conclusion, if you're looking for some good TurboGrafx games to play, then don't play this. There are plenty of better games to play on the console, by a long shot. But if you ever find yourself traveling back in time to 1988, then I guess give it a try. But if you want the real story in animated form, then stay tuned! What are you doing? I'm gonna reshoot that anime myself, and this time I'm gonna do it right. The Adventures of Keith Courage in Alpha Zones. The anime came first. The anime came first. It's Wataru. It's not Keith Courage. This isn't even a remotely difficult concept for you to understand. I even bought a camera to record it all on. That's a disposable camera. It doesn't shoot video. It's a disposable camera. You need to start listening to me when I talk to you, man. Now watch as I transform into my Nova suit, left to me by my late father. Where did you even buy a disposable camera in 2020? Do they still sell those? Transformation sequence, activate! Whoosh! Pa-pow! Yeah!
Hello? Noob? I need you to hold the camera for me. This is sort of a 2-person operation. And I can't get this helmet off on my own. Hello? Noob?
Hey everybody, I don't usually talk over the credits, but this is the first time I've had shoutouts to do. So instead of merely putting you in the credits, I figured I'd shout you out myself in person, or in voice. I have 2 $10 patrons donating to me, and I am eternally grateful. It really does help me out a lot, both through motivating me to bring you guys more content, and because, you know, it's important to have money and stuff. So thank you to Fira and Anakin Adcock for helping me make this video happen. You guys are awesome. And with that, I will see you all later. Thank you all for watching.